Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone you love, a friend, a partner, perhaps even a family member, and felt a sudden, chilling realization that the person looking back at you was not entirely there? It is a specific moment that every seeker of truth eventually encounters. You share a piece of good news, a moment of genuine triumph, or a breakthrough in your personal growth, and for a split second, before their social mask slides back into place, you see something else. It is not just jealousy. It is not just annoyance. It is a flash of ancient cold hunger. It is a look that seems to say, "How dare you shine when I am in the dark?" And in that moment you feel a drain, a physical sensation of your vitality leaking out, as if a plug has been pulled from the very center of your being. We are taught to call this toxicity. Modern psychology labels it narcissism, insecurity, or a lack of emotional intelligence. We tell ourselves they are just having a bad day, or that we are being paranoid. But what if I told you that your paranoia is actually a highly tuned survival instinct? What if that gut feeling isn't reacting to the person you know, but to something operating through them? Imagine for a moment that the betrayal you feel is not a social malfunction, but a biological feeding mechanism. Consider the possibility that the drama, the gaslighting, and the sudden shifts in loyalty are not personal attacks, but the symptoms of a hidden infection that has plagued human consciousness for millennia. We are setting out on a hunt today, not for a person, but for a force. We are going to peel back the layers of social niceties to reveal a mechanism described by the Gnostics in the dusty scrolls of Nag Hammadi, whispered about by the shamans of the Yaqui traditions, and mapped with terrifying precision by Carl Jung in his Red Book. They all saw the same thing. They saw that humanity is not at the top of the food chain. There is something that feeds on the bioluminescence of our consciousness, and its favorite hiding place is the psyche of the people closest to you. The question isn't why they are betraying you. The question is, what is using them to harvest your light? To understand this, we have to completely dismantle the way we view human identity. We grow up believing that our thoughts are our own, that our emotions are private, and that the people around us are autonomous agents acting on their own free will. But the ancient mystery schools suggest a terrifying alternative. They suggest that the human mind is an ecosystem, a territory that can be invaded, colonized, and ruled by forces that are not human. When you begin to wake up, when you begin to ignite the alchemical fire within your soul, you become a threat to this colonization. You become a glitch in the matrix of their control. This brings us to a concept that the indigenous people of the Americas called Wetiko. It is a mind virus. Unlike a biological virus that attacks the cells of the body, Wetiko attacks the spirit. It operates by deceiving the host into believing that the cannibalistic urge to consume others' energy is their own desire. The person infected by Wetiko does not know they are infected. They believe they are just being realistic or playing devil's advocate when they tear down your dreams. But in reality, they have become a host for a predatory energy that cannot generate its own life force. Because it is cut off from the source, from the eternal generator of the divine, it must steal life to survive, and it steals from those who have what it lacks. This is why the attack always comes when you are rising. Have you noticed this pattern? You can be miserable, broke, and depressed, and these friends will be the first to offer you a shoulder to cry on. They love your misery because your misery resonates with their frequency. It is safe, it is dark, but the moment you start the alchemical process of albedo, the whitening, the moment you begin to purify your life and emit a higher frequency, the dynamic shifts violently. Your light acts as an irritant to their demons. It casts a harsh shadow on the parts of themselves they have refused to face. Carl Jung, the great cartographer of the unconscious, warned us about this. He spoke of the shadow not just as a personal closet of repressed desires, but as a gateway. When a person refuses to integrate their own darkness, when they refuse to look at their own envy and their own malice, that unacknowledged shadow becomes an open door, and through that door, the collective darkness enters. The Gnostics called these forces the archons, the rulers who maintain the illusion of this material prison. They described them as inorganic beings, envious of the divine spark that humans possess, but have forgotten. Think of it like this. Imagine you are a lighthouse that has suddenly been switched on in the middle of a dark, stormy ocean. The creatures that have adapted to the dark, the ones that thrive in the murky depths, are not going to celebrate your light. They are going to be blinded by it. They are going to recoil, and then they are going to attack the source of the brilliance to extinguish it. The friend who makes the snide comment about your new diet. The partner who subtly sabotages your new business idea. The family member who reminds you of your past failures just as you are stepping into a new future. They are the unconscious puppets of this mechanism. They are the antibodies of the matrix, rushing to the site of an awakening to put it back to sleep. The tragedy and the deepest mystery of this hunt is that the person hurting you is often the first victim. They have been hollowed out. The predator, as the shaman Don Juan Matus described to Carlos Castaneda, has given them its mind. It has installed a foreign operating system that thrives on conflict, separation, and fear. When they gaslight you, it is the predator protecting its camouflage. When they provoke you into an argument, it is the predator poking you to get an emotional reaction, because that flare of anger, that explosion of frustration you feel, that is dinner. That energy release is the ambrosia they are feeding on. This reframes the entire battlefield. You are not fighting your friend. You are not fighting your spouse. You are fighting a parasitic installation that has hijacked their nervous system to get to you. And the reason it wants you is because you have something it desperately needs. You have the connection to the vertical axis of reality. You have the capacity for creation, for love, and for genuine joy, which are frequencies that the archontic forces cannot replicate, only mimic and consume. So we stand at a precipice. If the enemy is not human, but a psychic contagion that uses humans as vectors, how do we fight it? Conventional advice tells you to set boundaries or to communicate better. But you cannot communicate with a virus. You cannot reason with a hunger that has no ears. The only way to win this war is to become invisible to the predator's gaze. We must enter the domain of the alchemists and the sorcerers. We must learn how to change our own frequency so drastically that we slip off their radar completely. We must learn the art of transmuting the lead of their attacks into the gold of our own solar consciousness. The ancient texts provide a manual for this. They speak of a state of being, a vibration of such clarity and silence that the predator cannot touch it because it cannot perceive it. But to reach that state, we have to do something much harder than simply blocking a phone number. We have to look at the hook inside of us that caught their line. We have to ask why we were tasty in the first place. We have to descend into our own nigredo, our own blackness, and find the breach in our own walls. The hunt is about to turn inward. We have identified the beast. We know its name is Wetiko, we know its face is the Archon, and we know its hiding place is the unintegrated shadow. Now we need the weapon to kill it, or rather, the solvent to dissolve it. If we accept the terrifying premise that our reality is a hunting ground and that our emotional energy is the currency of this hidden economy, then the most urgent question becomes a practical one. How do we get off the menu? To answer this, we must turn to one of the most controversial and unsettling revelations in modern esoteric literature. It comes from the anthropologist Carlos Castaneda, chronicling the teachings of the Yaqui sorcerer Don Juan Matus. Don Juan dropped a concept that chills the bone because intuitively we recognize its truth. He spoke of the predator who gave us his mind. He taught that the human mind, the chaotic, incessant, worried voice you hear in your head right now, is not actually yours. It is a foreign installation. It is a device given to us by these inorganic beings to ensure we remain compliant, predictable, and easily harvested. Think about the nature of your internal dialogue. It is repetitive. It is often cruel. It obsesses over past failures and catastrophizes about future calamities. It judges, it compares, and it loops in circles of anxiety. Who benefits from this? You certainly don't. This mental noise, this mitot, as the Toltecs called it, is the dinner bell. It is the frequency that broadcasts your location to the predator. When a toxic person enters your life and triggers you, they are essentially pinging this installation. They say the one thing they know will hurt you, and your internal installation activates. You get angry, you get defensive, you start replaying the argument in your head 1,000 times. That replay loop, that is the extraction process. That is the predator eating. The ancient Gnostics understood this mechanism well. They knew that the Archons, these rulers of the illusion, could not read the divine spark directly. They could only perceive the turbulence it created in the lower atmosphere of the mind. If the mind is like a lake, the predator can only see you when you are making waves. When the surface is perfectly still, you become invisible to them. This is the secret of the protocol of invisibility. It is not about hiding in a cave. It is about achieving a state of internal silence so profound that you simply cease to exist on their radar. This brings us to the master key of spiritual defense, the discipline of inner silence. This is not the relaxation of a Sunday afternoon nap. This is the alert, vibrant silence of a warrior waiting in the brush. It is the active suspension of the internal dialogue. When you manage to stop the voice in your head, even for a few seconds, you sever the connection to the foreign installation. You unplug the coaxial cable that feeds the matrix of the predator. In that moment of silence, the friend who is trying to drain you will suddenly feel confused. They will feel a disconnect. They rely on your reaction to complete the circuit. If you do not react, if you do not engage the internal script of offense and defense, the circuit remains open and they cannot feed. Implementing this requires a radical shift in how we perceive social interaction. Usually when someone attacks us with a passive-aggressive joke, a backhanded compliment, or a guilt trip, our programming dictates that we must defend our ego. We must prove them wrong. We must win. But in the context of this spiritual warfare, winning the argument is actually losing the war. The moment you engage with righteous indignation, you have flared up. You have released a massive burst of emotional heat. You have just served a banquet to the entity operating through them. The entity doesn't care if you are right or wrong. It only cares that you are emotional. So the counter-move is what we might call the grey rock of the soul. You might know the grey rock method from psychology, becoming boring and unresponsive to a narcissist. But we are taking this to the metaphysical level. When the attack comes, you visualize yourself not as a wall that blocks the arrow, but as a mist that the arrow passes through. To block is to engage force against force. To become mist is to change your frequency. You anchor yourself in that inner silence. You hear the insult, you recognize the attempted sabotage, but you refuse to let it trigger the internal dialogue. You don't say to yourself, "How dare they?" You don't say, "I need to fix this." You simply observe. This observation without judgment is the most dangerous weapon you possess against the archontic forces. It acts like a mirror. When you refuse to absorb the poison, when you refuse to transmute their toxicity into your own pain, that energy has nowhere to go. Physics dictates it must return to its source. This is why when you stay truly calm, not suppressing anger, but genuinely detached, the other person often becomes irrationally angry or exhausted. The sludge they tried to throw at you hit your silence, slid off, and splashed back onto them. They are now drowning in the very energy they tried to offload onto you. This practice of invisibility demands that we give up one of our most cherished addictions, the addiction to being understood. The ego desperately wants the predator to understand us. We explain, we justify, we plead. "Can't you see I'm trying to help? Why are you treating me this way?" We believe that if we just find the right words, the predator will wake up and apologize. But you cannot explain light to a shadow. The shadow's nature is to obscure. By trying to be understood, you are essentially opening the gates of your fortress and inviting the Trojan horse inside. The protocol of invisibility requires you to be okay with being misunderstood. In fact, it requires you to relish it. Being misunderstood means you are encrypted. It means your code cannot be cracked by a lower operating system. But there is a catch. You cannot fake this frequency. You cannot just bite your tongue while boiling with rage on the inside. That suppressed rage is still a vibration, and a very tasty one at that. It might even be more potent because it is pressurized. To truly achieve the silence that creates invisibility, you must undergo a process of deep, internal alchemy. You have to remove the hooks inside you that the predator latches onto. These hooks are your own unhealed traumas, your secret shames, and your addictions to cheap dopamine. This is where we leave the realm of mere defense and enter the laboratory of the soul. We must move from the Gnostic realization of the prison to the alchemical work of breaking the bars. We must look at why we are susceptible to these attacks in the first place. The predator attacks the weak points. It attacks the cracks in the vessel. If you are addicted to validation, they will hook you with flattery and then destroy you with criticism. If you are addicted to the role of the savior, they will hook you with victimhood and then drain you dry. To become truly invisible, we must seal these cracks. We must enter the phase the alchemists called the nigredo, the blackening, the decomposition of the false self. We must identify where we are leaking energy not because of them, but because of us. The silence is the shield, but the transmutation is the sword. To wield it, we have to look at the fuel source of the predator within our own biology. We have to talk about the substances and the habits that keep our vibration low enough for them to reach us. We have to talk about the modern alchemy of dopamine and the ancient rite of purification. Because as long as you are addicted to the synthetic highs of this world, you are tethered to the feeding ground. To ascend, we must first descend into the mud of our own habits and clean the mirror of the soul. We have learned to silence the mind to become invisible. But invisibility is only a temporary tactic. You cannot hold your breath forever. Eventually you must exhale, you must exist, and you must shine. To do this without being eaten alive, we must change the fundamental substance of who we are. We must turn to the great work of the alchemists. For centuries, people believed these hooded figures in stone towers were trying to turn lead into gold to get rich. That was the cover story. The true alchemist knew that the lead was the heavy, dense, unconscious human ego, and the gold was the solar consciousness, the fully awakened spirit that is immune to corruption. This transformation is not a metaphor. It is a biological and energetic necessity for survival in a predatory world. The process begins with the nigredo, the blackening. This is the stage most people run from, and it is exactly why they remain victims. The nigredo is the confrontation with your own complicity. It is the terrifying realization that the energy vampires in your life are latching onto specific hooks that you have provided them. These hooks are your vices, your unhealed wounds, and your desperate need for external validation. As long as you carry the heavy lead of unhealed trauma, you are magnetically attractive to those who wish to exploit it. The predator smells the blood of your insecurity. In this phase, we must look into the mirror and ask the hard question, not why are they doing this to me, but what part of me is resonating with this abuse? We have to let the old identity, the one that identifies as a victim or a martyr, rot and decompose. It is painful. It feels like dying. But as the alchemist said, corruption of one is the generation of the other. You must let the false self die to make room for the king to be born. Once we have faced the darkness, we move to the albedo, the whitening. This is the stage of purification, and it is here that we find the ancient spiritual application of a very modern concept, the dopamine detox. In our current age, the archontic forces do not need to attack us with demons in the night. They attack us with notifications, endless scrolling, processed sugars, and synthetic lust. They keep our nervous systems fried, locked in a permanent state of fight or flight, constantly chasing the next hit of cheap dopamine. Why? Because a chaotic, addicted mind is a low-frequency mind. It vibrates at the level of fear and craving, which is the exact frequency range where these entities feed. When you are addicted to the cheap thrill, you are chemically tethered to the matrix. The albedo is the scrubbing of the vessel. It is the deliberate, strategic withdrawal from the noise of the world to wash the soul clean. This is not about productivity or getting more work done. This is an exorcism through abstinence. When you cut off the supply of cheap dopamine, when you turn off the phone, refuse the junk food, step away from the gossip and sit in the stark whiteness of your own existence, you are starving the parasites. You are removing the moss and the grime that they cling to. At first, the withdrawal screams. The mind kicks and fights. This is the cry of the lead resisting the fire. But if you hold the line, something miraculous happens. The noise fades. The water of the mind clears. You begin to see reality, not through the distorted lens of addiction and fear, but with crystal clarity. You are washing the windows of your perception so that the true light can finally enter. This state of albedo, of white purity, is the prerequisite for the final and most powerful stage, the rubedo, the reddening. This is the sunrise. This is the solarization of the soul. In the alchemical texts, this is often depicted as a red king rising from the flames or a phoenix reborn. In practical terms, this is the moment your vibration shifts from defense to radiance. You are no longer just not reacting. You are actively generating a field of high-frequency energy, love, gratitude, sovereign will, that is physically painful to low-vibration entities. Think of the physics of heat. A bacteria cannot survive in a kiln. A shadow cannot survive at the center of the sun. When you reach the rubedo, you embody the solar principle. You are burning with your own purpose, your own connection to the divine source. You are no longer looking for energy from others. You are a generator. And here is the paradox of the solar state. The very friends and vampires who used to drain you will suddenly disappear. They won't just text less. They will be repelled from your field by a magnetic force they cannot understand. Your light is no longer food, it is fire. It burns their camouflage. It exposes their shadows. They cannot hide in your presence anymore because you have become a walking revelation. This is the ultimate protection. It is not a wall you build to keep people out. Walls can be breached. It is an intensity of being that keeps the corruption from ever landing. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming so completely authentically yourself that you can no longer be fragmented by the collective insanity. You become a sovereign state of one. The hooks are gone. The handles they used to grab you have been melted down in the alchemical fire and recast into a crown of sovereignty. You are no longer a resource to be harvested. You are a force to be reckoned with. But be warned, this transformation is not a weekend retreat. It is a war of attrition against your own lower nature. The Archontes and the Wetico virus will try to pull you back into the lead. They will offer you your favorite distractions, your favorite dramas, your favorite excuses. They will whisper that it is lonely at the top, that it is colder in the light. And they are right. It is lonely. The air is thinner in the Rubedo, but it is the only place where you can breathe as a free being. The choice is no longer about which friends to keep and which to cut. The choice is between remaining a battery for a sick system or becoming the alchemist of your own destiny. And here we arrive at the final, mind-bending paradox of our hunt. We have spoken of predators, of mind viruses, and of energy vampires as if they were the villains of the story. But what if they are not? What if, from the perspective of the absolute reality, these forces serve a critical, unavoidable function? The ancient Gnostics believed that the Archons, despite their malice, were the unintentional examiners of the human soul. Think of the resistance of the air against the wing of an eagle. Without that resistance, flight is impossible. Without gravity, muscles atrophy. Perhaps the Wetico virus and the people who host it are not merely pests, but cosmic weights designed to test the integrity of your spirit. If you can be drained, it is proof that you are still leaking. If you can be triggered, it is proof that you are not yet master of your own house. In this light, the toxic friend, the jealous co-worker, the shadowy figures trying to dim your light, they are the ruthless personal trainers of your consciousness. They are pressing against you, probing for weaknesses, forcing you to seal your cracks and ignite your own internal sun. If they did not exist, you might remain a sleepy, unformed potential forever. They force you to wake up. They force you to choose between being food or being fire. This changes the entire emotional landscape of the battlefield. We stop hating the predator. We stop resenting the vampire. Hate is a bond. Resentment is a cord that ties you to them. Instead, we move into a state of cold, detached gratitude. You look at the person trying to sabotage you and you think, "Thank you for showing me where I was still seeking validation. Thank you for revealing the part of me that was still asleep." And then, with the grace of a sovereign being, you walk away, not in anger, but in the realization that you have graduated from their lesson. You have outgrown the test. The implications of this shift are staggering. It means that freedom is not something you beg for. It is something you become. The matrix, the system of control, the energy harvesting, it all relies on your consent. It relies on you agreeing to play the victim. The moment you withdraw that consent, the moment you reclaim your energy through silence, purification, and solarization, the prison walls turn into mist. You realize that the door was never locked. You were just too distracted by the noise to turn the handle. We are living in a time of great unveiling. The veil between the seen and the unseen is thinning. The ancient mechanisms of control are becoming visible because they are breaking down. You found this transmission because you are part of the team that is remembering how to dismantle the illusion. You are remembering that you are not a battery. You are a generator of infinite, divine reality. The path is narrow, and as we have seen, it is often lonely. It requires you to leave behind the comfort of the crowd and the sedation of the collective sleep. But the destination is the reclamation of your eternal soul. So, as we close this file, I leave you with one final, haunting question to carry into the silence of your own mind. If this reality is indeed a school designed to test the sovereignty of your soul, and if the predators are merely the final exam, have you been failing the test by fighting them, instead of passing it by transcending them? Are you ready to stop battling the darkness and simply turn on the light? And that's our hunt for now, a wild mix of documented history, Gnostic warnings, and tantalizing what-ifs based on bibliographical sources. If these ideas resonate with you, consider subscribing so we can continue this journey together. What do you think? Is the war for your energy real, or is it just a metaphor for the battles within?